Hello everyone, and welcome to the 79th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring our delayed patron pick for April 2022, the Weyland-Yutani Corporation from the Alien franchise. An intergalactic mega-corporation who holds profits above all else, Weyland-Yutani serves as a secondary, but far more threatening antagonist in the Alien franchise. The xenomorphs are a terror, and they're capable of causing chaos, death, and destruction on a galactic level. However, the xenomorphs are limited by their biological need to reproduce by inhabiting other life forms, and because of this, they aren't able to spread throughout the known galaxy without the help of their chosen hosts, or their creators, the engineers. And Weyland-Yutani's willingness to fill that evolutionary disadvantage, no matter the cost to innocence, is what makes them so terrifying. In this video, we'll be discussing the history of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, how it evolved into a paragon of unrelenting ambition in the face of certain doom, its justifications for pursuing its never-ending quest to obtain a xenomorph, and how it uses the vast amount of power it's been afforded over the course of its existence to abuse the technology and people at its disposal for the benefit of the company, and only the company. But before we begin, let's first take a moment to talk about our sponsor for this video, Factor. I love to cook, but even a culinarian needs a break every now and then, and unfortunately, those breaks usually come in the form of takeout and fast food. Factor eliminates that problem and gives you the break you deserve without having to resort to unhealthy options. Factor accomplishes this by offering fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. With a menu that changes weekly, over 27 meal options, and over 33 add-on options, Factor isn't just convenient and healthy, but it's also a great way to mix up the monotony that comes from eating the same meals week in and week out. And if you're having trouble choosing between all these options, you can let Factor do all the work by crafting your orders based on your taste preferences and meal history. Their meals are ready to eat in just 2 minutes as well, making them an easy fix for those mornings when you're running late, or when you need a quick meal before or after the gym, which is how I use my meals from Factor the most. You can check Factor out yourself by going to go.factor75.com/ViolI120, and when you select the plan that's right for you, use the code ViolI120 to receive a whopping $120 off of your purchase. So enjoy some culinary leisure today and secure this amazing deal by going to factor75.com/ViolI120 and using the code ViolI120 when you check out. Thank you, Factor, for sponsoring this video. Now, in order to streamline our coverage of Weyland-Yutani, we're going to be using information from a wide variety of sources that have been labeled canonical in this incredibly helpful article that was created by a former Fox consultant, Andrew E. Gaska. Feel free to skip this section if you're satisfied with that, but if you'd like a more detailed explanation of what we're going to be using in this video and why, please continue on. As some of you may know already, the list of material created for the Alien universe is quite expansive, and that's reflected here in this article. However, what concerns me the most is what can officially be considered canon as of the making of this video, and that's a hard thing to determine, considering there has never been an official list created by Fox defining what is and isn't canon. And because this article isn't officially recognized by Fox as being the end-all be-all of Alien canon, some of you might take issue with the content I choose to include or exclude from this video, and that's perfectly fine. Andrew mentions in this article that he wrote it using his knowledge of the Alien franchise and the material he used when he assisted in the creation of the Alien role-playing game. And with an absence of concrete canon, this list may or may not be in line with your own personal headcanon. However, the reason I'm using this list is to provide a bit of cohesion to this video. As Andrew mentions in this article, a good majority of the material that can be found in the franchise is contradictory. Specifically, the material that he's listed under the Myths and Legends section. It's for this reason that we'll be covering the material found in the Tier 1 to Tier 3 sections of this article, and even then, we won't be utilizing each source, as some of them don't have anything to do with the morality of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. To clarify, the sources we're going to be looking at are in order: the Weyland Industries website, via the Wayback Machine, the 2023 TED Talk hosted by Peter Weyland, Prometheus, Covenant Origins, Covenant, Alien, Alien Defiance, Alien Isolation, Resistance, Prototype, Rescue, Out of the Shadows, River of Pain, Aliens, Aliens 3, The Cold Forge, Into Charybdis, Colony War, Infiltrator, Fireteam Elite, Alien Resurrection, The Weyland-Yutani Report, and finally, Sea of Sorrows. Now, the last question you might be asking yourself at this moment is, how is this video so short if you have 23 sources to pull information from? Well, that's because while most of these sources are stories that have immense variation between them, the general structure of each of them is basically the same. Weyland-Yutani, or one of their competitors, attempts to obtain a xenomorph. Someone, or a group of people, attempts to stop them, and they generally succeed, which is essentially how this franchise keeps generating so many new entries, by keeping the corporation as an undying entity that's continuously stopped by many different individuals. So with that in mind, we won't be delving too deep into each of these stories, as again, the motivations of the corporation remain the same in all of them, but we will be discussing what they do in each of these stories, so there will be a heavy amount of spoilers present in this video for each of the entries that I've listed. I hope you're all satisfied with that long-winded explanation of the sources that are present in this video, and if you aren't, well, you can let me know down below. Now without further ado, let's begin. Prior to the acquisition of Weyland Corp by the Yutani Corporation following the death of Peter Weyland, these two separate entities were amongst the numerous megacorporations that emerged throughout the 21st century. Weyland, perhaps the most influential out of all of them at this time, was responsible for many of the greatest innovations mankind had ever seen, and that was thanks in large part to the genius of the company's namesake, Peter Weyland. For some background information on Peter, I'll be reading this short biography on his life that can be found on the Weyland website now. Sir Peter Weyland was born in Mumbai, India, at the turn of the millennium. The progeny of two brilliant parents, his mother, an Oxford-educated professor of comparative mythology, and his father, a self-taught software engineer, it was clear from an early age that Sir Peter's capabilities would only be eclipsed by his ambition to realize them. By the age of 14, he had already registered a dozen patents in a wide range of fields from biotech to robotics. But it would be his dynamic breakthroughs in generating synthetic atmosphere above the polar ice cap that gained him worldwide recognition and spawned an empire. In less than a decade, Weyland Corporation became a worldwide leader in emerging technologies and launched the first privatized industrial mission to leave the planet Earth. "There are other worlds than this one," Sir Peter boldly declared, "and if there is no air to breathe, we will simply have to make it." So with the genius of a prodigy and relentless ambition, Peter would oversee the advent of revolutionary innovations like artificial intelligence, long-distance space travel, the cure for cancer, hibernation chambers, synthetic humans, and many, many more. Now, there's no doubt that the research megacorporations like Weyland funded and coordinated made some of humanity's wildest technological fantasies into a reality. But the problem we're going to encounter as this video progresses doesn't lie within the enormous contributions that these companies have made to the development of mankind, but with the people that these companies are made up of. And our first encounter with this problem is found during the TED Talk hosted by Peter Weyland in 2023. Here, Peter talks about the humble beginnings of humanity and our first encounter with our first piece of true technology, fire, and how far we have come from that humble beginning, eventually reaching the present day, where he lists off many of the innovations pioneered by him and his company that I mentioned just a moment ago. He intermixes this monologue with an overview of the Greek myth of Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from Mount Olympus and bequeathed it to humanity so they could evolve beyond the pitiful existence they had been granted by these gods. Prometheus's punishment for this was to be chained to a rock, where his liver would be eaten by an eagle every day and regenerated every night, so the process could begin once again. Eternal agony given as a reward for his desire to help those less fortunate than the gods. The reason Peter is even bothering to go on this diatribe about human ingenuity and myths of divine punishment for daring to go against the will of greater beings is because he draws a parallel between the myth of Prometheus and his own work. And in the myth of Peter Weyland, those possessive gods take on the form of the various world governments and the individuals who make up those governments. Peter laments how the work he's attempting to accomplish is bogged down by government oversight, rules, restrictions, and ethical guidelines, all of which he believes were put in place because the powerful feared what would happen if they gave the powerless the opportunity to expand their own power. Now, what Peter is saying here isn't necessarily wrong, as it is sometimes the case that innovation is repressed by government, religious, or social pressures. But whether the repression of those innovations is justified or not is another matter entirely. Should we allow corporations to monopolize water if they should somehow find out how to create it? Probably not. Should we allow a corporation to continue researching artificial intelligence and synthetic humans for the betterment of mankind? Probably. These are only two examples, but you can apply this to any situation to determine whether or not something should or shouldn't be legal, and things that are legal or considered moral should be illegal or considered immoral. But that is only a piece of the problem, that is the culture that Peter Weyland creates. As though the drive to circumvent any morals or laws in the pursuit of innovation, profit, and domination is certainly a catalyst for the evil that we encounter later on in this story, the fuel for that catalyst is hubris. In this speech, Peter shows himself to be an incredibly charismatic and egocentric individual, as not only does he fluff himself up as a man who will change the world if he's allowed to, but he also marks humankind as the new gods, beings who are able to create life and shape their universe into whatever they wish it to be. Again, being sure of oneself and appreciating the achievements of humanity isn't necessarily a bad thing, but both wonderful and terrible things are bred from these beliefs. The wonderful is given to us in the form of the multitude of groundbreaking technologies that Weyland Corp manufactured from the time of its inception up until the events of Prometheus and beyond. And the terrible is born from an equally wonderful thing, the desire to discover our origins. This was the deepest desire that Peter Weyland held during his lifetime, and this desire was only made more fervent in the twilight of his life, as we see when he states to David upon his creation that every ounce of human ingenuity meant nothing if they were unable to answer this question, an answer he believed lay outside the realm of mere biological chance. But unfortunately, this search for a deeper understanding of humanity was intermixed with the hubris of a dying man who believed that his creators could save him from death and grant him eternal life. Whether it was his goal to extend immortality to all of mankind is unknown, but if what he says after being awoken aboard the Prometheus is any indicator, that being that he was specifically searching for a way to prevent his own death, that's unlikely. It's probable that Peter, once obtaining immortality, planned to rule the known universe as a god king for all eternity. As if he truly believed that humans had entered the realm of gods, it stands to reason that he would desire to become a true god. Funnily enough, this would mark Peter as being in the same category as the very gods that he denounced for shackling Prometheus, as granting himself eternal life without sharing that power with the rest of humanity is a direct parallel to Zeus denying fire to mankind. However, as is often the case with hubris, Peter is met with disappointment on finally making contact with an engineer, and he subsequently meets his doom at the hands of his creator. The actions taken by Peter here began a chain reaction that would see his artificial son, David, piloting the engineer's bomber to their homeworld and annihilating its inhabitants with the very plague they had sought to unleash upon mankind. What will come of David's actions remains to be seen. But what's more important than the potential fallout from those actions, as of the making of this video, is the legacy that Peter left behind. Taking on the spirit of unlimited ambition, following Peter's death, his company would undergo a merger with the Yutani Corporation after its CEO, Yutani, successfully outbid several other corporations who were vying for control of Weyland's secrets. During the time period between the end of Prometheus and the first Alien film, Weyland-Yutani would experience opposition to their continued efforts to colonize the known universe in the form of various resistance groups like the Earthsavers, a fanatical cult centered around the harrowing nightmares of Duncan Fields, visions of the horrifying future that awaited humanity should Weyland-Yutani continue their colonization efforts and unleash the xenomorph upon the galaxy. Duncan's visions proved to be more or less true, as after the crew of the Nostromo find the derelict engineer bomber on LV-426, the legacy left behind by Peter Weyland shows itself to be the greatest threat facing humankind in this universe. Returning to Earth with a payload of ore, the Nostromo encountered a strange distress signal on their journey home that is eventually revealed to be not so strange, as the company was fully aware of the alien craft that lay abandoned on LV-426. The synthetic on board the Nostromo, Ash, had been given orders to obtain an alien specimen from this craft at any cost, which included expending the crew of the Nostromo if necessary. This is our first encounter with the overarching goal of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, the obtainment of a living or deceased xenomorph specimen, no matter the cost. And here we find several practices that the company would continuously employ in its efforts to obtain a xenomorph, those practices being subterfuge, manipulation, and deception. With their vast financial and logistical power, Weyland-Yutani is able to sway hearts and minds into doing its bidding simply by virtue of its existence, as the alien universe is one rife with conflict and misery. Earth is decaying under the weight of its corporate overlords, and the opportunity to earn a better living by giving yourself up to experimentation, whether that be colonial or scientific, is too much to pass up for many people who have no better alternative. Similarly, the government and military are deeply corrupted, and Weyland-Yutani is able to create new or stop existing legislation that doesn't suit its agenda with the help of numerous bribed officials, and members of the colonial marines are often persuaded to act in the interest of Weyland-Yutani rather than the people they serve. All that power is backed up by their technological supremacy. As though they have competitors in this universe, they are more often than not the undisputed corporate power in the galaxy, and with incredibly advanced artificial intelligence, as well as heavy firepower backing them up, they're an unrivaled and all-consuming force that can ensure that every scenario they wish to be involved in is more likely to succeed than not. And this is only made all the more apparent as we find Weyland-Yutani, or one of its competitors, at the heart of every conflict the characters who make up these numerous tales find themselves in. In 2137, a combat synth of the Davis line, along with Zula Hendricks, fight for their lives as they try to overcome a xenomorph threat aboard a scientific station. Other combat synths and colonial marines on the payroll of Weyland-Yutani attempt to ascertain a living specimen, but ultimately fail due to the actions of Zula, Davis 1, and Dr. Hollis. At the same time, Amanda Ripley, alongside the Weyland-Yutani representative and lawyer, Samuels and Taylor respectively, is sent to Sevastopol Station with the promise of discovering her mother's fate by obtaining the black box from the Nostromo. The true motive of the corporation is revealed as they enter the station. Here they discover the wife of the captain of the ship that discovered the box has been infested by a facehugger. A struggle ensues against the xenomorphs and the Weyland employees who are attempting to obtain a specimen, and they thankfully fail in doing so. 3 years after these two events, Amanda and Zula are beginning a resistance movement aimed at stopping Weyland-Yutani from obtaining a xenomorph once and for all. This brings them to a colony ship that's been subjected to a xenomorph-based pathogen, one that causes 1,000 inhabitants to die while birthing numerous xenomorphs. They help a survivor of the colony, Alec Brand, escape so he can reveal the truth of what happened to him and the other colonists on this mission. This results in hefty fines being leveraged at the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, but due to the vast amount of power and resources at their disposal, this ends up being only a minor setback in their continued efforts to obtain a xenomorph. During this time period, a corporate spy masquerading as a pirate named Tamar Prather obtains an ovomorph, a xenomorph egg, from a commercial ship called the Proximo, afterwards delivering it to representatives of the Venture Corporation on the planet Jericho 3. After escaping potential servitude to Weyland-Yutani, Zula Hendricks is also on Jericho 3, where she's training candidates for the Venture-sponsored Colony Protection Force. Zula, with the assistance of her trainees, eliminates the new subspecies of xenomorph that was created as a result of Venture's attempts to study the creature, the necromorph. After this incident, Zula resolves herself to continue fighting to exterminate the xenomorph threat. A necromorph egg is discovered sometime after this incident during a survey mission of the Venture facility. 5 years later in 2145, we find Alec Brand, the survivor of the doomed colonists stationed on the Gaspar, to be a newly made member of the Colonial Marines. Alec reunites with Amanda and Zula to stop Weyland-Yutani from plundering the planet that the Gaspar was anchored above for its vast amount of xenomorphs and a bacteria native to the planet that is highly effective at eating radiation. The company is successfully stopped from doing so. In 2159, crew members of the mining vessel DSMO Marion encounter xenomorphs during a mining excursion on LV-178. They subsequently discover the Narcissus, the escape shuttle that Ellen Ripley used to escape the destruction of the Nostromo. Prior to its destruction, the synthetic Ash had managed to upload his consciousness into the ship's mother system. A struggle with both the xenomorphs and Ash ensues as Ash attempts to complete his mission, obtain a xenomorph specimen for Weyland-Yutani. Ash and the xenomorph threat are neutralized by Hoop, the lead engineer of the Marion. In the years following this event, the colony Hadley's Hope is established on LV-426. Though the colonists believe they are simply colonizing the planet, the true goal of Weyland-Yutani is to draw out a xenomorph so it can be captured. In 2179, Hadley's Hope is eventually overrun by xenomorphs. Some of the colonists manage to escape with the help of Captain Brackett, a member of the Colonial Marines, leaving behind only one survivor, the girl known as Newt. The pod Narcissus, containing Ellen Ripley, is retrieved just after this incident. After undergoing questioning by company executives, she is effectively coerced by the company representative Carter Burke into returning to LV-426 to investigate the loss of contact with Hadley's Hope and to help with the extermination of a possible xenomorph threat. The company once again attempts to obtain a xenomorph through Carter Burke. Carter perishes in his attempts to obtain a specimen and outmaneuver the crew that accompanied him on this mission. Ellen Ripley, with the help of Newt, Corporal Hicks, and the Bishop Synth, eliminate the xenomorph threat and escape aboard the Sulaco. On their journey home, a facehugger that managed to survive the conflict at Hadley's Hope starts a fire on board the Sulaco, causing the mother system to eject an escape pod containing Ripley, Colonel Hicks, Newt, and the Bishop synthetic. The pod crash lands on a remote prison colony called Fiorina 161, which is alternatively known as Fury. The stowaway facehugger attaches itself to a prison dog, unleashing a xenomorph upon the colony. The company-sponsored vehicle sent to retrieve Ripley later arrives to obtain the xenomorph with the help of the real Bishop. Their efforts to obtain the xenomorph fail when Ellen Ripley sacrifices herself to destroy the prison. During this time period, a program had begun on the space station RB-232 that involved the breeding of xenomorphs by splicing their DNA to that of chimpanzees. The primary researcher on site, Dr. Blue Marsalis, attempts to cure her degenerative disease by using the mutagen that facehuggers inject to their hosts to breed chestbursters. The facility is sabotaged by Seegson employees who are attempting to disrupt the work of Weyland-Yutani and steal the secrets to their research on the xenomorph. The station is destroyed, but Dr. Marsalis makes it out alive and is brought before two Seegson executives with the body of a synthetic named Marcus, one of their operatives, who carries the dangerous xenomorph pathogen within his corpse. 5 years later, a Weyland-Yutani laboratory is discovered on the planet LV-991, a planet that has been designated as Hasanova Data Solutions, a project that is being undertaken by the Iranian government with the goal of using the whirlpool Charybdis that lies in the center of the complex to use its energy for data storage. Production is halted when an abandoned Weyland-Yutani lab is discovered at the center of the whirlpool. The man in charge of the project, Kamran Afghanzadeh, is killed by a xenomorph while he was investigating the laboratory and a mysterious ship that we soon learn was carrying Dr. Blue Marsalis. The Colonial Marines division that specializes in xenomorph extermination, the Midnighters, are led by Captain Kylie Duncan, along with Dr. Matsushita, a Weyland representative, to LV-991, where they plan to deal with the xenomorph threat. The ulterior motive of Captain Duncan is revealed as the investigation progresses, that being the plan to unleash the xenomorph into the Iranian-controlled station so the Colonial Marines can then claim the station for the United Americas, as well as a xenomorph for Weyland-Yutani. Both endeavors fail, however, with the help of Dr. Marsalis, who's transformed into a queen by splicing her own DNA with that of the xenomorphs. The revelation of Captain Duncan's plan results in a conflict known as the Colony War, a war that is fought between the United Americas, the Union of Progressive Peoples, and the Three World Empire. Amanda Ripley's widower, Chad McLaren, is attempting to stop Weyland-Yutani's program to weaponize the xenomorph and finds himself on a drilling facility on LV-187 that has been destroyed by xenomorphs. A conflict ensues between the Colonial Marines and British after the British are blamed for destroying the facility. During this struggle, a xenomorph queen is eliminated, and several ovomorphs are taken by Royal Marines Captain Augustus Trent and attached to unmarked Royal Marine ships to be sent to the colonies of their enemies. 18 years later, in the year 2202, genetic experimentation is conducted on rodents and felines with xenomorph DNA on LV-895. After this trial run, experiments are conducted on human specimens. These specimens are criminals, and the researchers conducting the experiments have equally murky pasts, a fact that Weyland-Yutani abuses to force them into continuing their dreadful work. The researchers lose control of the xenomorphs, and the station is overrun with them, which prompts a fire team from the Colonial Marines to be sent to LV-895 after they pick up a distress call. It's revealed as they maneuver through the facility that Weyland-Yutani had been excavating engineer ruins at the same time that they were conducting the aforementioned experiments. The mother AI at the facility, Cynthia, attempts to engage what she calls Asset Zero, an engineer bomber that has been programmed to set a course for Earth where it will drop its payload. Following the destruction of Cynthia, Asset Zero, and the escape of the fire team from the planet, Weyland-Yutani and Hyperdyne Systems send forces to reclaim the planet and the surviving xenomorph specimens. Over 150 years later, in the year 2379, Weyland-Yutani has been disbanded, and the governments of the world have united. And with that union, a military organization known as the United Systems Military is born. And the USM is now the supreme power in the galaxy in the absence of corporate competition. Seeking to weaponize the xenomorph, the USM clones Ellen Ripley using blood samples collected prior to her death. Extracting xenomorph DNA from the cloned Ripley, the scientists aboard the Auriga begin studying the xenomorphs, but shortly after confining their specimens, the xenomorphs break loose and overrun the facility. After discovering that the Auriga's autopilot is set to head for Earth, the cloned Ripley, with the help of the synthetic Anna Lee Call, successfully crashed the ship into an uninhabited area of Africa, eliminating the xenomorph threat. The USM collapses as a result, and Weyland-Yutani is revived. 115 years later, a colony called New Galveston has emerged on LV-178, the planet where the DSM-O Marion encountered xenomorphs, and the escape pod housing Ellen Ripley. A xenomorph is discovered on LV-178 after a descendant of Ellen Ripley, Alan Decker, reports a toxic waste pool to his superiors at ICC, accusing Weyland-Yutani of negligence when mining the planet centuries prior. Decker is strong-armed into assisting Weyland-Yutani in obtaining the xenomorph. and he returns to the planet with mercenaries that are loyal to Weyland-Yutani representative Andrea Rollins. During the mission, the xenomorph queen found deep in the mines is destroyed, and Decker escapes with Manning, the captain of the mercenaries, as well as 2 mercenaries who have unfortunately been infested by facehuggers. The mercenaries are given over to the company. Everything that we just went over is the legacy left behind by Peter Weyland, a company so obsessed with weaponizing an alien that they're willing to sacrifice thousands of lives in order to gain dominance over the galaxy. Now, in a few of these stories, Weyland-Yutani wasn't the organization trying to obtain a xenomorph, but even so, the only reason that these other organizations attempted to obtain one was because of Weyland-Yutani's continued efforts to find and weaponize the xenomorph. In the Weyland-Yutani report, the writer of the report mentions the potential life-saving innovations that could come from experimentation on the xenomorphs, like advancements in medicine or body armor fashioned from their exoskeletons that could save the lives of soldiers. However, there's a fundamental issue that's being ignored here that's said best by Dr. Malcolm in another film, Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. As I mentioned earlier in this video, the contributions Weyland-Yutani and other corporations like them made to humanity cannot be ignored, but their willingness to ignore the threat that a single xenomorph poses to the entirety of humankind cannot be ignored either. Everything they built over centuries would be completely destroyed in a matter of months, if not years, should a widespread xenomorph outbreak take hold of the galaxy. And the fact that they're willing to engage in this horrifying mission while expending the lives of thousands of innocents in the process is a testament to how this corporation personifies the most extreme kind of corporate greed, a greed that seeks to benefit the few at the expense of the many. We can blame Peter Weyland for starting this culture of ruthless corporate ambition, but the blame also lies with the numerous individuals who continuously abide by that policy, a policy of an insidious corporation that will see the galaxy totally consumed by its unrelenting evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Weyland-Yutani? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, and to my patrons, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and Reddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.